One of the most iconic parts of every college football season is when the MAC plays their football games during the week. This is typically in the backstretch of the season, and many refer to this as MACTion. The collection of schools that plays in the Midwest gets an opportunity to play their games on national television for everyone to see. There's usually some sort of crazy event that happens, a crazy finish, or something that college football fans love to see. In today's video, I want to preview the 2024 MAC Conference. We're going to go through all the teams, preview each team, talk about what some of the MACTion craziness could be, and just overall talk about why the conference is going to be exciting to watch this year. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's get started and preview the 2024 MAC Conference. So I want to first go through each team and give you a quick preview. We're going to start out west. The first team I want to talk about is the Toledo Rockets, who had a great season last year. DeQuan Finn was a superstar quarterback, but unfortunately, they lost a lot. Still though, they're probably going to be the favorite to win the Western Division, as Jason Candle is a great head coach and will get the Rockets out and running. Even losing guys like Quinyon Mitchell, Penny Boone, and DeQuan Finn, the Rockets are still in decent spots, as Tucker Gleason will start at quarterback, and they'll have a backfield led by Jaquez Stewart and Georgia transfer Savon Clark. They'll also have a group of underrated receivers in Jerwan Newton and Junior Vandeross. Both of them had at least 700 yards receiving last year. Daniel Bolden returns at linebacker for a very good defense, so the Rockets should once again be good this year and are an exciting team to watch. Moving over, we have Northern Illinois. The Huskies ended up going 6-6 last year, but finished second in the West. They had good play from running back Ontario Brown, but had inconsistent quarterback play. Well, now that Rocky Lombardi is gone, the Huskies will likely start Ethan Hampton at the quarterback position. They also return Ontario Brown, who had 1,300 yards last year, and their leading receiver, Trayvon Rudolph, is also back. He'll hope to get back to his 2021 form, in which he had nearly 900 receiving yards, and their schedule is tough. They have non-conference games against Notre Dame and NC State, and they'll be fighting for bowl eligibility again, and honestly, it may not happen. Eastern Michigan is the next team I'm going to talk about, as they were once one of the worst teams in college football, but under head coach Chris Creighton, they've turned it around. They've gone 6-6 in the regular season last year, and they actually made their 7th bowl game last year, but unfortunately they lost their 3rd consecutive one. Cole Snyder transfers in at quarterback after spending the last 2 years at Buffalo, and while he was there, he had 31 touchdowns and over 5,000 yards in 2 seasons. Delbert Mims and his 8 rushing touchdowns will come in from NC State, and their non-conference schedule has them playing Jacksonville State, UMass, St. Francis, and Washington. It's not hard to see them starting out going 3-1, and they could be a dark horse to win the MAC when it's all said and done. Going over across the state, Central Michigan went 5-7 last year under head coach Jim McElwain and would miss a bowl game. They're going to look to be a lot better this year, but they're largely a question mark. At quarterback, Jace Bauer transferred to Sam Houston, leaving them with sophomore quarterback Bert Emanuel. He hasn't thrown a pass in his career yet, and that's got to be concerning to Chippewa fans. Their best weapon on offense is senior running back Marion Lukes, who ran for 737 yards behind a pretty bad offensive line. Tyson Davis and Jesse Pruitt return at receiver as well, but the defense finished 107th last year in points allowed and didn't get much better in the offseason. Honestly, there's not a whole lot of reason to believe that Central Michigan will be any good. Going down to Indiana, we got to talk about Ball State. The Cardinals are seen as one of the worst teams in the country according to the new college football game. They finished 4-8 last season behind Kyle Kelly and Lane Hatcher at quarterback, but breakthrough freshman Caden Samanza had a solid year last year and looks to be the starter as a sophomore. With Marquez Cooper now at San Diego State and Vaughn Pemberton and Charlie Spiegel playing at running back, the offense could be a little bit better. They have an NFL hopeful in Quinyon Magwood, and last year's defense only allowed 24.4 points per game. If their offense can somehow catch up and get a little bit better, maybe Ball State could shock some people. They also landed former big-time recruit Kyron Montgomery from Mizzou, so maybe Ball State will be going under the radar and will get a chance to prove people wrong. Still though, I would not have that high of expectations for the Cardinals. Rounding out the final team in this division, we have to talk about Western Michigan. No offense, but this is not the same Western Michigan team that we saw back in 2016 that went undefeated and had Coach Fleck and Corey Davis. Still though, they haven't been that bad, as a couple years ago they upset Pitt in 2021, but last year they ended up going 4-8 under first-year head coach Lance Taylor. Hayden Wolf was the starting quarterback for the majority of the season, throwing for 8 touchdowns and 5 picks, but eventually Trace and Bourget had a few solid games as well. The main offensive threat will be sophomore Jalen Buckley, who had 1,000 rushing yards and 10 touchdowns last last year, and he also had 4 games of over 100 yards, and 2 of them he almost had 200. Last year's leading receiver Kenneth Womack is also back, but the defense needs to improve from going from 109th in points allowed if they're going to get any better. Honestly, I wouldn't have that high of hopes. While I've always liked Western Michigan, there probably aren't going to be many expectations this year. Going over to the eastern side of the MAC division, we need to talk about Miami of Ohio. Miami's been picked to win the MAC with 119 first place votes in the preseason poll. It's honestly pretty easy to see why. Last year, the team went 10-2 with a win over Toledo in the MAC championship game, and then a loss to Appalachian State in their bowl matchup. Senior quarterback Brett Gabbert will be back after last year's season-ending leg injury, and they'll be helped by running back Kenny Tracy, as their main running back Rashad Amos ended up going to Ole Miss. Their defense was a major factor in their success last year, as they allowed under 16 points per game. But with Caden Woolard now at Oklahoma, it's going to be up to a couple of seniors, such as Ty Wise, to keep the defense on top of the MAC conference. Miami of Ohio should be pretty fun to watch, and maybe they'll pull off some sort of upset in the non-conference like they did last year. The next team we need to talk about is Ohio. Ohio and head coach Tim Albin barely missed a championship game last year. They ended up going 9-3 with a big-time win against Iowa State at home. There was that controversial missed field goal thing, but it was kind of cool to see Ohio win. Their offense was good at grinding out teams and making close games either winnable or not close. This was mainly because of the leadership of Curtis Rourke at quarterback, but Rourke would end up transferring to Indiana, where he should probably be the starter, and then last year's leading rusher is now at Minnesota. This leaves an offensive burden on sophomore running back Ricky Hunt, and he will have to step up desperately. The receiving room is in question, as Miles Cross ended up leaving for Indiana as the top wideout, and then Will Kachmarek ended up leaving for Ohio State. They'll have to find new production to keep up with last year's results, and for now, I would say the Ohio Bobcats are probably going to be near the top, but not anything special in the MAC. For Bowling Green, the team ended up going 7-5 last year under Scott Loeffler, and that's major improvement. They ended up being one of the worst teams in the country just a few years ago, but they've gotten a lot better. They ended up playing Minnesota in their bowl game, and transfer quarterback Connor Bazelak will return for his last year of eligibility. Last year, he threw for 12 touchdowns and 7 picks, and also had over 2,000 yards through the air. I think the most notable moment from the Scott Loeffler era and from Bowling Green last season was when they went on the road and beat Georgia Tech. They ended up winning 38-27, and it's not easy to beat an ACC team. This is also the same Georgia Tech team that was eventually competitive against teams like Georgia and went to a bowl game and has a lot of hype this year. That's pretty good for Bowling Green, who, as I said earlier, was absolutely terrible. Luckily, they'll have some weapons returning, as Terrion Stewart will return at running back after only playing 9 games last year, but he ended up leading the team in rushing yards. He'll be joined by Teron Keith and Jason Patterson, as well as one of the most underrated tight ends in the nation in Harold Fannin. If everything goes their way, Bowling Green could actually be special, and they're a team I'm definitely going to be rooting for. Last year, Buffalo ended up struggling. This is not the same team or program that produced guys like Jarrett Patterson or head coach Lance Leipold. Last year's team went 3-9 under the head coaching leadership of Maurice Linguist, and they're now led by Pete Lembo. He's going to try to turn things around as the new head man, and with Cole Snyder now at Eastern Michigan, the Bulls will likely lead on CJ Agbana at quarterback. He just threw 1 touchdown and 2 picks last year in relief duty, and that's very concerning. Jaquez Barksdale might get his lion's share of carry at running back behind a pretty sketchy offensive line. All of last year's receivers are pretty much gone, leaving the Bulls with Nick McMillan and a 6'6" player by the name of Chance Morrow. Sean Dolak and George Wolo return on defense, but this year could be even worse than last year. There aren't going to be high expectations for a first-year head coach, and sadly, Buffalo is seemingly headed in the wrong direction. Another team that was absolutely abysmal for the last few decades was Akron, and last year was not much different. The Zips ended up going 2-10 last year under former Mississippi State head coach Joe Moorhead, but it was pretty well apparent that they had one of the worst roster situations in the country going into that year. Quarterback Jeff Undercuffler led the Zips in passing touchdowns with 4, but also threw 9 picks. Honestly, that is just an absolutely terrible stat line. The fact that your quarterback threw 4 touchdowns and 9 picks is just terrible. This year, the Zips starting quarterback will likely be Taj Bullock, as he ended up transferring in from Virginia Tech, and he threw 3 touchdowns and 3 picks. The running game might be a bit of a question mark, and the receiving game will need help after Josiah Gatherings ended up leaving for UConn. The fact that transferring from Akron to UConn is appealing is honestly kind of sad. It doesn't help that they face one of the hardest schedules in the MAC, and they also get to play Ohio State early on. That game will probably be 79-0, and I honestly really do feel bad for Akron. The final team we need to talk about is Kent State. They were the only team that was worse than Akron last year, and they were under first-year head coach Kenny Burns. They finished with just 1 win that season, and this came over FCS Central Connecticut. Their defense regularly gave up blowouts, and their offense struggled to score much more than 20 points a game. Tommy Ulatowski will likely be the starting quarterback after a 7-touchdown, 2-interception performance last year, and Gavin Garcia will return at running back after 544 yards on the ground. Honestly, I feel pretty bad for them. There's not much to look forward to for Kent State, and it looks like the Flashes will struggle and be near the absolute bottom. What's really sad is Kent State was actually starting to do something a couple years ago, as they had a couple of talented players. You had quarterback Colin Schlee, who ended up going to UCLA, you had Dante Cephas, a receiver who went to Penn State, and then you had Tez Walker, who ended up going to UNC and got drafted. Right when Kent State was starting to build something, it all completely fell apart. The MAC's going to be pretty interesting this year, as going through it again, I would say the two best teams are 100% going to be Toledo and Miami of Ohio, and there's a really good chance that they could rematch. Northern Illinois should be improved and has a chance to get a pretty good record, and the teams, in my opinion, that could come out of nowhere are Eastern Michigan and Bowling Green. I'd say that my dark horse Cinderella team is going to be Bowling Green, as I like Connor Bazelak as a former Mizzou fan, and they beat Georgia Tech last year, and I really like Coach Leffler, so we could see them coming out of nowhere. I think Akron and Kent State and Western Michigan are going to be awful, and I think that Ball State and Ohio also have a chance to kind of surprise. Other than that, the MAC will be the MAC, as things are going to be fun. There's going to be snow games, there's going to be rain games, there's going to be pretty much every type of weather, and you just never really know what's going to happen during MACTion. It's going to be interesting to watch, and I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. But what do you guys think? If you're a fan of a MAC school, what did I get right and wrong in my preview? Who do you think will win the conference? And what is your favorite MACTion moment? Be sure to let me know down below. Leave a like if you want to support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out all my other videos on the end screen. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.